Hello there and welcome to Briefly Everything. Today we're going to go through 2000 BCE all the way 300 years later to 1700 BCE. We're mainly going to talk about the Babylonian Empire and the Hammurabi Code. Okay, so starting off 1800 BCE. By this time, all the areas of the world will have been populated, including the Nordic regions of Europe, which would become home to those lovable rascals, the Vikings, also my ancestors. But that's not for another 2500 years. When everyone else was farming, the people up here in the north were still hunter-gatherers. And why it's relevant to mention them now is while the Bronze Age in some places started already 3000 BCE, it took as long as 1200 years before that knowledge reached the Nordic countries. So in 1800 BC, the Bronze Age officially starts here. We found many fascinating artifacts dating back to this time in the Nordics, so it's believed that many actually travelled from the Nordics to Mesopotamia and around that region to trade already during this period. Now, over in the Indus Valley at that time, things fell into decline after being around for 1500 years. Joining history 3300 BCE as one of the first civilizations, we now bid you farewell. Thank you for being with us. In 300 years, the Indus Valley will be no more and they're replaced by another historic chapter, the Vedic period, of which we'll talk more later. You've probably already heard of Babylon, and not just because it's mentioned in a number of Bob Marley records. Well, around this time in Mesopotamia, Babylon had already started emerging as a powerful city. They had a very famous king, King Hammurabi, who was a great leader and helped them rise up from just an ordinary city. But more importantly, their king, Hammurabi, wrote down the Hammurabi Code of law in cuneiform, making it the first complex set of laws in history. It was influenced by the Code of ur-nammu that we got 200 years earlier, also in Mesopotamia. It'd be wrong to say that this is the first set of laws, but it's definitely the first very complex set of them. Now, the Hammurabi Code of Law was a form of retaliatory justice commonly associated with the saying, an eye for an eye, arguing that what you had wronged, you shall be wronged back. So under this system, if I broke your bone, then you would have to, break my bone in return. His laws were also pretty cruel, as minor crimes like if a son hit his father, the code demanded that the boy's hand be cut off. Unfortunately for the kids of Babylon, no one would write any child protection laws for a few thousand years. For more abstract accusations like sorcery, the code allowed for a trial by ordeal. Usually the accused would be pushed into a river, and if he drowned, the accuser shall take possession of the sorcerer's house. However, if the gods spared the accused, the accuser instead would be executed, and the supposed sorcerer who jumped into the river would receive the accuser's house. Makes all the sense in the world, I think. Okay, so despite having some crazy laws, Hammurabi was pretty progressive, I'd say. He actually established minimum wages, something that to this day isn't a guarantee in many places of the world. Field laborers, for example, would be guaranteed a wage of 8 gur of corn per year, and sailors received 6 gur. Please don't ask me about the exchange rate for that. Now in 1763, Hammurabi and the Babylonians started conquering neighboring cities, thus making it the Babylonian Empire. And it's during this time that Babylon grew to become the most populated city in the world with over 100,000 citizens, which is obviously a lot for the time. Now 13 years later in 1750, Hammurabi died. Oh no. And the Babylonian Empire started falling apart. Another oh no. Abandoning the different cities, letting them regain their own previous power, while Babylon resumed its previous gig as just a city. So they'll be around in history. However, in about 1,000 years, you'll start hearing of the neo-babylonian Empire, who would be a major force to be reckoned with. But that's not for another 1,000 years. So I bid you goodbye and thank you for listening. Today, we've traveled 300 years through the history books. We've covered the Babylonian Empire and the Hammurabi Code, and a few other things as well. I hope you've thoroughly enjoyed it, as I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. See you next time. Thank you for watching.